actually being arrested.
Appearance is everything.
But anyways, it is, anybody that's interested in things like this, I think you're missing it if you don't see it.
And she threw up the car and I was bleeding and all this, and she goes, and then she said, when I got home.
Good colors. And it works well with the suit. Quick question for you. I heard it from Nick, so I'd rather, that's what I wanted to ask you. When did you see it? So you actually saw the fight. Have you seen him since the fight? He came on 2 months ago. Looked like Ben dropped his blood out. Now he stayed around long enough to heal, but then like you said that last week. Yeah, I think we lost like that. Well, thank you. I mean, get with, he was a good cat as far as, to have on the porch. That's what I got to do for the kid cross. You bet price for it. Okay. I told her the situation. Just totally missed this side of the sea. Like the vampire. Healed up to where it wasn't a problem anymore.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for choosing to be here. Happy Mother's Day to all those to whom such a greeting is applicable. We are in John chapter 18 this morning. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, went there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Does that seem curious to you? John 18. You're welcome. Why do you suppose they drew back and fell to the ground? These are soldiers, and they've come with lanterns, torches, and weapons.
I don't know if they fell to the ground. I'm thinking, did they die or did they start worshiping him? I don't know which.
think they withdrew from him in fear. That's what I understand. That's why I'm asking. I hadn't considered that possibility. Considering what happens, I tend to go with there was a certain fear. After all, they wouldn't take him during the day. They came at night. There was a betrayal afoot, and he seemed rather bold. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. I am he. So he asked them again, whom do you seek? Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he, so if you seek me, let these men go. This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, of those whom you gave me, I have lost not one. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword in its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? What is Peter's profession? What's he doing with a sword? It was a stand your ground state, so yeah, he's standing his ground. Okay, we've got a fisherman with a sword. Now, what do you envision the sword looking like? Cindy says it's a dagger. It's a little, probably 2 feet, 18 inches, 2 feet long. Not a Three Musketeers kind of sword or medieval crusader, but he's got one of these. It's an unwieldy thing. It's for hacking, chopping, and stabbing.
In case you need to stab somebody.
Yeah, it's it's a concealed weapon. Yes, ma'am.
I know this probably before that time, my history's not that good, but I have a fillet knife.
Okay, I believe you.
And a fillet knife actually looks like a sword. It has a very sharp point.
Yeah.
It's thin, it's long, it's a good stabbing.
You hear that, Eddie? So being a fisherman, you're saying maybe he had a fillet knife. That's
Something on that order.
okay. Possibly, but I don't think he's dressing the fish. He's prepared for stabbing. This is a sword. What we don't. This is a difficult few chapters here because there is so much more we know about the story than John tells us. The disciples had 2 swords among them. Peter's carrying one of them. Apparently they're fearful that something is going to happen. How do you suppose Peter was wielding this sword, using it? When he goes, was it his intention to cut off Malchus' ear?
Might have been his intention to cut his head off, but just missed.
I'm of that opinion.
Yeah.
Now, the kind of sword it was, if he was going to cut his ear off, if he was going to hit him, and he drew like this, he'd have done more than cut his ear. He'd have hacked into his clavicle and his muscles in here. There'd been some serious damage. I'm kind of thinking this way. Malchus tilts his head to keep from getting his head cut off, and what happens? He left an ear hanging up there. I'm imagining, or did you want to?
Well, go ahead and finish your point. Yeah, I was gonna ask.
I don't have a point. Go ahead.
Well, did you notice Charles went like this?
Yeah.
If you're trying to kill somebody and you know what you're doing, that's what you do. If he's swinging it like this, that's a guy who doesn't use it very often for close combat, because he's a fisherman. He's got a sword on him, but he doesn't use it very efficiently.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was absolutely trying to kill him.
Yeah, he was there for, I think he was going for his head. That's just me personally. Perhaps he went like that and missed altogether and cut his ear off. We don't know, but he got his ear. Put your sword in its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? What did Peter think that meant?
Can I comment on the other phrase?
Sure.
One of the problems in church history is passivism.
It's what?
Passivism.
Thank you.
People thinking Christians aren't allowed to defend themselves. I actually heard a debate one time where the pacifist was asked, if your wife was being violated in front of you, could you use violence to stop it? And he said no. And so I think that topic is important. Jesus did not take his sword away from him. He said, put it back in your sheath. In other words, this is not the right time to use it. It is absolutely the right time to use it when someone's trying to violate my family, or somebody's trying to violate my country in the case of a military man. But there's all the difference in the world between that and somebody wanting to kill me because I'm a Christian. You want to kill me because I'm a Christian? Go for it. You want to kill my wife because you want to take all of our jewelry? I'm going to pull a sword out of my sheath.
Or whatever it is I have, yes.
So I think I think we've complicated a very simple issue. Defending the family, defending the country is one thing. Dying for your faith is another.
The pacifism is not a light subject, and we're not far removed a couple of generations from a generation of members of the church who refused to enter armed services in any branch for this very reason. In fact, a couple of generations before that would not vote because they felt they were participating in warfare, basically, by doing so.
A lot of great thinkers in the church at the time of the Civil War were pacifists. And as my friend pointed out to me one time, he said, it gives you a whole different view on war when you're looking at it in your backyard. And so even though I don't believe in pacifism, I sympathize with why guys like David Lipscomb, man, they're experiencing the war. They're not writing about it historically. They're living through it.
I wasn't going to say this, but I can't not say it. A great movie is Shenandoah. Have you seen the movie Shenandoah? Shenandoah is this very subject. Jimmy Stewart is the father of a family of sons in the Shenandoah Valley, and he's staying out of the war until it comes to his backyard. When it comes to his house, then things are different, and he changes as a man. Wonderful, wonderful. Highly recommend. In fact, I can't think of a Jimmy Stewart movie I wouldn't recommend. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. Wait a minute. High priest for a year? Anybody remember what the deal was with the high priest? High priest came from the family of Aaron and stayed in the family of Aaron. How do we have a father-in-law, son-in-law, high priest for a year situation?
Things had gotten political.
Yeah.
I would also add that high priest serves until he died. So why are there even two guys talking about being both high priest that year? It's not an office you pass around. You serve until you die, and then your son serves in your place.
In the Old Testament, the mother of the high priest, let me back up even further. Cities of refuge. We're familiar with cities of refuge? Nod your head this way if you are. Okay. People who had fled to the cities of refuge would be released on the death of the high priest. So the people who were in the cities of refuge, seeking refuge, and their families, guess what they did an awful lot of? Praying for the death of the high priest. What? The mother of the high priest spent a lot of time going to the cities of refuge, meeting with these people and trying to convince them not to pray for her son's death. Even being high priest has its issues. You got people who've been killing and families of the folks who've been killing, whether justified or not, praying for the death of the high priest. What a mess.
Which is yet another reason why we need a better high priest than that. Jesus Christ will fit the bill just nicely, thank you.
If you go back to the sword question, Jesus told them that they needed to sell their belongings and buy it.
I'm sorry.
Jesus told them to buy a sword and loot. So that would be maybe why he had one.
Well, I'll be so bold as to say this is one of those comments that'll get me hugs or run out on a rail. If you don't have a gun, buy one and learn to use it. Learn what it's for and how to use it and when to use it and how to take care of it and that sort of thing. Because in these times, that would be wise. Perhaps Jesus gave the same admonition to his disciples. Carry a concealed weapon, fellas. You never know. We're traveling up and down these roads. We're a small group, and sometimes we'll get separated. We don't know what's going to happen. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. So that disciple was known to the high priest. Oh no. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" "I am not." Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I've spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple where all Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said. When he said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, so they asked him, "You also are not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it, said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. Where's the significance there?
Before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times.
A fulfillment that becomes obvious when the rooster crowed. And in one of the other accounts, at this particular moment, Jesus turned and looked at Peter. Have you ever been somewhere back when you were a child, going about having a good time, and you looked over and your mother was looking at you with that look? And it froze your blood?
Wait till we get home.
Either there's going to be an embarrassing situation at the moment, or somebody's going to be in dire straits when we get home. Stops you dead in your track, makes you start replaying in your mind, what have I been doing? What was I doing? What did I do? What did I do? Looking around saying, anybody, what, weren't you doing what I was doing? Or am I in this by myself? What's going on? I'm not sure Jesus looked at Peter that way, but he looked at him and all of a sudden it hit Peter like a ton of anything. He had denied Jesus 3 times, and just hours before, I'll go with you. It does not matter what happens, I'm with you. It's also at this time in one of the other accounts that Peter went out and wept bitterly. He has denied. They led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. This is the most hypocritical, disgusting thing. They won't go into this Gentile's place, but they're going to plead for killing Jesus, but they want to be clean in order to eat the Passover. Cart before the horse, anyone? They have completely got things turned around, messed up, misunderstood, misprioritized. They're ignorant. They're not as ignorant. This might be a case where Paul might say, I would not have you ignorant, brethren. This is reminiscent of the folks going down to Jerusalem, the man going down and getting waylaid by the thieves, and he's lying on the side of the road, dying. And the men come past, the Jews come past, and a Levite, a priest. They won't touch him. Why? He might be dead. He might be unclean, and I can't be unclean. I've got to go. When you were driving here this morning, some came at some distance. Did you pass someone who's got a flat tire on the side of the road and you say, I can't stop, I got to get over there to church? I can't see what's going on there, I got to get to church.
You're talking about blessed are the merciful.
Sometimes we miss the point. Jesus taught that you ought to do the little things, but you sure better do the big things. That letter of the law that's drilled into you since you were little bitty kids, those are important. But don't forget justice, mercy, faith, compassion, pity, serving your fellow man. Do those things. Those are the big things. And sometimes even we miss that. So Pilate went outside to them and said, what accusation do you bring against this man? They answered him, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him to you. Kind of smart alecky, isn't it? Pilate said, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. The Jews said, it's not lawful for us to put anyone to death. This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. Pilate says, what's the accusation? They said, if he wasn't doing evil, wouldn't we have brought him to you? He said, well, then take him and judge him by your own law. The Romans had an interesting way of dealing with the Jews. They let them rule themselves and live by their own laws and their customs within certain parameters. And if you got outside those parameters, Roman law took over. If you had a riotous meeting, no matter what the cause, Romans would quell it, and they'd quell it in a hurry and kind of violently. You can judge in your own judgments, you can take in your own laws, apply your own laws, do whatever, but you can't kill anybody. You can't execute anybody. Executions are up to us. And we're not going to execute unless somebody's violated our laws. We're just not going to do that. So this is what they're saying here. Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. It's not lawful for us to put anyone to death. So they're saying, we brought him to you. We haven't made the accusation, but we want you to kill him. Execute him by your law. So Pilate enters his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done? He says, I'm not getting mixed up in this. Your people have delivered you to me. Tell me what you've done. My kingdom's not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom's not of this world. Pilate said, so you are a king. You say that I'm a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I've come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Pilate said to him, what is truth? You hear that a lot today, don't you? Nobody knows what truth is. Truth is relative. What's true to you may not be true to me. What's true to me may not be true to you. This is nonsense. And so even back then, Pilate says, well, what is truth? We're not going to get anywhere talking about truth. What is it?
Pilate had the actual truth standing before him, but he didn't give him an opportunity to respond. He turned and walked away from the one person who truly and actually knew the truth. The application there is today we have people, including government officials, but also individuals, who have the truth either in their possession or, like the Bible there on the table, they have the opportunity, but they turn away from it in searching for relativism or whatever it may be, when the truth is there to behold or be held.
Excellent point. He says, what is truth? Jesus said, I am truth. And Pilate really didn't hear him. He's truth. Yeah, that's a relative thing. What is truth? And if he had just waited, Jesus could have revealed all truth to him. He hadn't got time.
I find it interesting, too, that the oldest manuscript from the New Testament that we have discovered dates back to 125 AD. It's this portion right here, when Pilate asked Jesus what is truth. That's the oldest living manuscript that we have. Shout out to Michigan. It's located at the University of Michigan's museum. But don't you find that kind of ironic? The oldest.
Yeah, the oldest piece of truth says what is truth. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Even though it's at Michigan.
Shout out to them.
After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release you the king of the Jews? They cried out again, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was a robber. Apparently, Barabbas is well known and pretty much well hated. He's one of these, there is no Department of Corrections for him because he can't be corrected. He won't be corrected. You let him out, he's going to do what he's been doing. And there's no changing him. A fellow I grew up respecting and got to work with and held him in high esteem all his life, said, when you go to the circus and they have all the animals out there performing and doing tricks and you're amazed, you know the one animal they don't have out there performing and doing tricks? Snakes. Snakes do what snakes do, and you can't teach them to do anything else. This is Barabbas. He's like a snake. You can't train him to do anything else. You can't break him from doing what he's been doing. This is what he's doing. If I let him go, you know what he's going to do. We don't care. Release him. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. What was the movie? Passion, yeah. Did you see that movie? Did you see that flogging? I believe the crucifixion was anticlimactic to the flogging. The beating These were skilled men. This was their job. They could flog a man literally to the brink of death and not kill him. And flogging to them was a means of torture. They delighted in their task, and they were good at it. They could practically skin a man alive with the whips and the flogging materials that they used. They could cut the skin, they could cut the muscles, they could even chip away at bones. They could peel the skin right off a man and beat him and beat him and beat him till the man couldn't cry, couldn't scream, couldn't wince, could only stay alive. In those situations, a man would rather pass out, but they were good at it. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. What is a purple robe about?
Royalty.
King, it's royalty. And they made a crown of thorns. They came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you that you may know I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said, "Behold the man." If there was an ounce of compassion, of honor, of pity, seeing a man who had been beaten, flogged, bleeding, lacerated like nobody's business, presented here as a king. Is this what you call a king? In his purple robe and his crown of thorns. We have inflicted, y'all know us, we have inflicted pain on this man, the likes of which I haven't seen in a long time.
And yet, all the people that understood Isaiah 53 should have recognized him as the king.
Should have. And some days later did. But not now. Not now when it was important. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, yes, ma'am?
Pilate didn't offer Barabbas to them.
In another account, he does. He gives them a choice. And they chose Barabbas.
I thought that, and I've been sitting here looking for it, but
Yes, he gave them.
they did what we do today. That they had a choice between the king and the world. They chose Barabbas. They chose the evil. We have a choice between Christ and the world.
They chose, let's see how I can say. They didn't choose Barabbas because they liked him. They chose Barabbas because they hated Jesus.
That's what we do. That's exactly
What we've been doing since Adam and Eve.
yeah.
Do not love the world or the things in the world. The love of the Father is not in you. All that's in the world, lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, pride of life.
You can't serve two masters.
He who who loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him.
Your turn.
We're playing spiritual.
Yes, ma'am. And still, imagine, to these people, Jesus is not just a threat. No one can do the things that he has done. It is an inescapable fact that he is sent from God. He said himself, if you don't believe me, believe the things I've done, the signs, the wonders, the miracles. If you don't believe me, surely you can believe that I was sent from the Father, because no man can do what I've done except the Father sent him.
Which really takes us back to Wednesday night and the plagues and hearts being hardened.
She just wants you to know she was listening.
Can I add something else that we kind of skipped by without noticing?
Okay.
I love the passage in Isaiah 53, his judgment was taken away. When the Ethiopian eunuch is reading the same passage, he says his justice was taken away, which I think is better, it focuses the mind in the right area. In every way imaginable, Christ didn't get justice. And one of the ways is you never arrest a prisoner on a capital offense at night. You have to do that in broad daylight, in front of all Israel, to prove that you're giving him a fair trial. The very fact that they even arrested him at night was reason to let him go.
Everything about the arrest, the betrayal, the arrest, the appearance before Annas and Caiaphas, everything violates Jewish law. It was it was not a miscarriage, it was an abortion of justice.
Can you imagine a judge saying, I know it's unpopular, but I find him innocent, so before I release him to go home, you want me to beat him? And of course, in this world, half the country would say, yeah!
When the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, crucify him, crucify him. Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him. The Jews answered him, we have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. This is the first time they have leveled an accusation that had anything to it. Before this, in this account, they've simply said, we don't like him. Kill him. We're tired of him. Rid us of him. We turn him over to you. We're not going to question it. We're not going to appeal to Caesar. We're not going to do anything. Kill him. But when they said he makes himself to be the Son of God, he's even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again, and he's even more afraid of what? Whatever he does here is on the record. And if the people above him, if his superiors above him, if he's making a mistake of any kind, it could cost him some big time. So this man says he's the Son of God. Okay, now, that's not something I can kill him for. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, where are you from? Jesus gave him no answer. Jesus was not in much of a condition to give him an answer. So Pilate said to him, will you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you? Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." I could speak for quite some time on the matter of authority as taught in Scripture. But all authority is given from God, and there is no authority except that God has given it. That means that nitwit who is your boss that you haven't given account to, who hasn't got enough as Rowdy Yates said about Mushy the other day on television, he hadn't got enough sense to eat, let alone cook. When that person that you're dealing with hadn't got enough sense to see through a ladder, but they're your boss, that doesn't give you any right, authority, or excuse for not honoring that authority. All authority has been given by God, and if God gave it, I better honor it. I better observe it. I better give it the respect and the obedience that it's due. Even vile, evil kings, dictators, evil nations rise up because God has authorized it. God has authorized it for a purpose which may not be obvious to anyone on the face of the earth, but it's God's plan. It may be to do like it was for the Hebrews, rein them in, cause them to return to God. This appears to be the only role in the world of the Philistines, to come up against the Hebrews, conquer them for a while, and for them to cry out to God, and God would save them, and then they'd turn away from God, and here come the Philistines again, over and over and over. God raises up nations, kings, presidents, governors, parents, elders, bosses. Everybody who has any authority at all has it because God wanted it. For whatever purpose it serves God, and for me to question it is rather presumptuous and ignorant. And that's all I'm going to say about that at this time. From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you're not Caesar's friend. Everyone makes himself a king, opposes Caesar." Okay, now they've changed it again. Now I'm not mad because he says he's the Son of God. If you release him, you're not Caesar's friend because this man sets himself up as a king. And if you don't put that down, we're going to tell Caesar that you let this man who says he's a king go. And we're bringing him to you and saying, this man needs to be disciplined by y'all because he's opposed to Caesar. He's a king. Well, now what's Pilate going to do? So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, in Aramaic, Gabbatha or Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, "Behold your king." They cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. They took Jesus, and he went out bearing his own cross to the place called the place of a skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him with two others, one on either side, Jesus between them. Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross that read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." This was not uncommon. You put the man's crime on an inscription and put it on the cross with him, so anybody who came by to see what was going on would know why that man was being crucified. Many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Aramaic, in Aramaic and Latin and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but rather this man said, 'I am King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." He said that because that's why he's crucifying him, because you told me this man was the King of the Jews. Now you want to say this man said he was. No, you told me he was, and that's why he's being crucified, and that's what I've written, and it's going to stay there. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier, also his tunic. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be." This was to fulfill the scripture which says, "They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Every picture I've ever seen of Jesus being crucified, he's got some kind of little towel or something covering up his private area. That's not how it was. Part of crucifixion was utter, total humiliation. Nailed to a cross, suspended where everybody could see his nakedness, his offense is written above his head, the fact that he has been beaten to within an inch of his life. He's still wearing apparently the crown of thorns. When they took that purple robe off, what do you suppose happened? If he was bleeding as badly as the Bible depicts it, depending on how long that purple robe was left on him, the blood began to coagulate and stick. And when they pulled it off, what happened? Opened it all up again. A man crucified, his muscles knot and cramp. He's fevered, and there is nothing. And there he is, naked on the cross in front of everyone. So the soldiers did these things, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. There's an awful lot of Marys there. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." He was not talking about, "Behold me, I'm your son. Look at what a mess this is." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." What he was saying to his mother was, "Here's John, this is your mother. This is your son. Woman, behold your son." And to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. And my time is up. I thank you for yours. Lord willing, we'll pick up about verse 28 next week.